Did it finish with Saturday night, or will it spiral further? Already, Iran's first ever direct attack against Israel sent the whole region into uncharted territory. We'll ask about the measure of its response to Israel's targeting of Tehran's embassy compound in Damascus, whether the proportionality shows Iran's strength or Iran's weakness, whether Israel's prime minister will heed the call of G7 allies to leave it there and to move towards an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Israelis say the common challenge posed by Iran offers an opportunity to shore up strained ties with an Arab world that's frozen all rapprochement since the war in Gaza. Problem is, the ball's in the court of a Benjamin Netanyahu whose political survival for now seems to hinge on a long war. Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking, does it stop there? Joining us from Uppsala in Sweden is Ruzbe Parsi, Director of the Middle East North Africa Program at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
We're in the company as well of Kedevan Gorgestani from our International Affairs Desk. How you been?
Hi, Francois.
Your reactions on the hashtag F24 debate. Israel still mulling its response here in Europe. We've been seeing a lot of Iranian ambassadors called in, including in Belgium and here in France. This is Emmanuel Macron speaking earlier.
We condemned it, we intervened, and today we are going to do everything we can to prevent the situation from flaring up or escalating. And so we are going to try to convince Israel that we should not respond by escalating, but rather by isolating Iran, by convincing the countries in the region that Iran is a danger, and by increasing the sanctions.
So that's a firm tone there shown towards Iran. At the same time, out of Washington, what we've also heard is calls for restraints placed on Israel. Administration officials, after that phone call that took place between Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden, saying that Washington would not join any response to Tehran's assault, and suggested, quote, that Israel take the win.
Yes, that was the message, according to the reporting, that Joe Biden gave to Benjamin Netanyahu just as the Iranian attack was coming to a close, if you will. The message from the Americans is this was a display not only of Israel's mighty defense, that it was, yes, an unprecedented attack, but also an unprecedented defense. And also it showed that Israel's allies were there when it mattered the most. And so the idea is this should be seen as a win, take the win, and leave it there. Yesterday, I was on a call with senior administration officials who were briefing reporters, and their message was, look, Israel, we understand, will have to respond in some way. The goal of the Americans and of most of Israel's allies is to try to make that response one that will not further inflame the situation. So the message from one of the senior administration officials was Israel needs to carefully think through how it's going to act next, because how they decide to react will likely determine what happens in the region in the coming days, weeks, and possibly months, because the Iranians have also been very clear. If Israel responds in a major way, the Iranians said, what we did on Saturday night is not going to be the end of it, and we're going to do even more. So the idea right now is to sort of keep Israel where it is, try to contain it, accepting that Israel is going to do something, but trying to minimize the way it responds and the consequences on the region, and trying to put pressure on Israel to say, look, we came to your defense when you needed it the most. Listen to us. Try not to make things worse. So,
Ruzbe Parsi, both sides trying to project strength. Coming out of this, what would you say, first, when it comes to Iran? Did they project strength or weakness by this very calibrated attack? Some say it was even telegraphed.
I would say it was a show of strength and some cunning, if you will, in exactly the fact that it was calibrated in a way of both showing their capacities without actually necessarily triggering a big Israeli reaction by avoiding any casualties and so on. So in that sense, it was at least an attempt to show that they can establish deterrence and reciprocity in this ongoing low-intensity, high-intensity conflict with Israel without necessarily doing it in a way that forces Israel to counterattack in a big way. They might do it anyways, but that would be their choice rather than that it's compelling.
We spoke earlier, Rouzbeh, with a source at the French presidential palace who said that the elimination of the head of the Revolutionary Guards, Qasem Soleimani, by the United States in Baghdad constituted a much higher value-added political target than what the Israelis did by hitting the embassy compound in Damascus and the reprisal attack that we've seen over the weekend. Would you agree with that?
Well, there is some context here as well. I mean, first of all, it was the Americans who killed Soleimani, and they did get a reaction. But yet again, Iran calibrated it in a way that the Americans could, if you will, save face and not feel forced to then yet again counterattack the Iranian attack. And this is the same thing. But the difference, of course, is that the Americans have signaled that they're not interested in a big conflict with Iran. Iran is not as sure of that with Israel for the very simple reason that the Israelis have made it a habit of killing high-ranking Iranian officials and generals and whatnot. So the need to establish deterrence with Israel is at this point more important.
And when you look at Iranian media this Monday, are you... what are your thoughts? We heard of at least 3 journalists charged for being critical of the way the Iranians have handled things.
Well, I mean, obviously the government outlets are all full of praise and so on, but others are more critical exactly because they know the stakes. I mean, what Iran has done is risky in the sense that it is not a given that the Israelis will read the signal for what the Iranians want them to read it as, nor is it clear that the Israelis will react in a way that the Iranians find reasonable once the signal has been sent, which is that the Israelis will decide, well, okay, it's fair enough, so to speak, and now we both can deter each other, and it's good enough for now. On the contrary, Israel is known for its ability and willingness to go over the top when it comes to retaliation. So in that sense, it was a very risky move, and it's not clear that it was a risky move that worked, because we still don't know what the Israelis are actually going to do.
Yeah, because what we've seen since October 7th are proxies. Iran, which claims that it did not plan the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel, but certainly at the very least enabled it by supporting it, and is certainly supporting Hezbollah. Is the veneer gone for good, Rouzbeh?
Of?
The veneer of Iran's being able to offer plausible deniability, saying it's not attacking Israel.
Well, you could say that you're right in one sense, in that the Iranians have used this idea of plausible deniability, which of course was very thin to begin with, as a way to both escape responsibility themselves, but also, to be fair, to give their counterparts an option. Do you really want to go head-on-head with Iran or not? If you don't, then you will stick to the story that it was this group or that group, and then attack them instead. So what the Iranians have done, which of course is risky, is to say, if you attack us directly to the Israelis, then we will attack you directly. It's a risky move, but it could also, in a, if you will, perverse way, establish a new kind of stability, in that the Israelis now know that there is great risk in attacking Iran and would therefore refrain, which in turn would make the Iranians less in need of going on a confrontation with Israel. Now, the Israeli story would, of course, be different. They think this is unfair, which is, fair that they think that. But I think the interesting thing right now is that if this works, it will force the Israelis to recalculate their whole strategic outlook, in the sense of, up until now, being able to more or less unpunished do what they like militarily. But from now on, they're going to have to calculate that any direct attack on Iran will be retaliated.
Just one final point on this, very briefly, Rouzbeh. Are you surprised that Benny Gantz, one of the heads of the opposition, who's inside that security cabinet, that war cabinet, kind of like a grand coalition because of the war, stating, according to several sources, that he was in favor of a retaliatory strike while the missiles were still incoming, and that he was upset that didn't happen. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, in that sense, you can say he is an Israeli politician. There is no difference between left and right, to whatever extent there is a left in Israel, when it comes to national security. So in that sense, it's not necessarily surprising. One would have hoped that he would have taken a different tone, because I think it's not just about retaliating against Iran and deterring Iran. It's also the relationship with the United States, because the United States has been signaling and trying to get the Israelis to understand that, as your reporter mentioned, take the win for what it is, and don't make this worse right now than it already is.
All right, Jordan, for its part, insisting that the downing of projectiles by its forces was standard policy, part of its defense against any violation of its airspace. Here you see one of the projectiles shot down Saturday overnight over the capital, Amman. The foreign minister taking exception to the Iranians taking exception.
Unfortunately, there were offensive statements by the Iranian media, including the Iranian official news agency. Today, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the Iranian ambassador and delivered a clear message to him that these insults to Jordan must stop and the questioning of Jordan's positions must stop. Iran's problem is with Israel, not with Jordan.
By the way, it's not just Jordan. The Wall Street Journal, Kedevan Gorgestani, reporting that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates shared intelligence with the United States that helped repel Iran's attacks. Now, since October 7th, the Arab world has said all bets are off when it comes to closer ties with Israel. What can we read into what you just heard there from the Jordanian foreign minister and from the reports we're getting on the role of the wider Arab world?
Well, when it comes to Jordan, there are three things really to keep in mind. There is their longstanding support for the Palestinian cause, and even more so since October 7th. They've been extremely critical of Israel and its operations in Gaza. They've been calling for a ceasefire. They've been really attacking Israel on that. There's also the aspect that they're in close military and intelligence cooperation with the Israelis, and they know, as well as the Israelis, that military and intelligence cooperation is absolutely essential to the sort of stability of the region and of both of their countries, the security of both of their countries. And finally, the third aspect, which is very important in this case, is the wariness of the Jordanians vis-a-vis the Iranians. They see the influence of Iran in the region. They see what is happening in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Lebanon, with those groups that are backed by Iran. And the Jordanians don't want to become one of those countries, don't want to see happen in their country what is happening with Iran's influence in the countries that I just mentioned. So all of this means that they had to tread a fine line when it came to their response. That's why you saw them really insist on the fact that they were defending their airspace and their country and not defending Israel. And right after this, after defending their airspace, the foreign minister also talked about Israel and was critical of Israel and saying, we defended ourselves. Don't forget about Gaza. He basically accused Benjamin Netanyahu of using the confrontation with Iran to rally the international community behind him, which seems to be working at this moment, to sort of, quote, dilute the international community's focus on what is happening in Gaza.
Will it be a surprise, Rouzbeh Parsi, this reaction by the Arab world?
Well, not necessarily, because I think a bit like the Americans, we have to differentiate between defending Israel or participating in an Israeli war on Iran. So the fact that a lot of people kind of came together to defend Israel is partly, at least, not about Israel. It's about avoiding a new major regional war. And on this, they can all agree, irrespective of their positions otherwise. But then, if we were to turn the tables and say tomorrow Israel is going to attack Iran in such a way that there will be a regional war, I'm not sure you will see the same big group of countries willingly standing on what would seem to be Israel's side.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Our show curtailed due to a strike. Rouzbeh Parsi, I want to thank you for joining us from Uppsala. I want to thank as well Kedevan Gorgistani. You're watching France 24.
kuwa gatanu nimugoroba hamaze gukerera ku isabato imodoka biguma haza imodoka y'umweru irimo biguma niho baturasiye abapfa barapfa abakira barakira.
3 decades ago, the genocide in Rwanda against the Tutsi shocked the world.
94, c'est l'année zéro, qui a rasé tout, qui a rasé nos vies, on n'est pas les seuls. Le génocide, c'était un ouragan qui dévaste tout, absolument tout. Et il n'en reste quasi rien.
This documentary takes you from France to Rwanda, following the perpetrators of the unthinkable and the survivors, still fighting for justice to be done.
Le procès, c'est ce qui va rendre aux rescapés la dignité qu'ils ont perdue pendant ce génocide.
Rwanda, the hunt for genocidaires, a story of courage and commitment to bring the truth to light on France 24.